Today, we're taking a quick surface level look at how many Southern Christians in the 18th and 19th centuries justified slavery using the Bible. Now, this is interesting to me because it shows how Scripture can be twisted when people read it through cultural assumptions, and yet another mishap of being left on our own to interpret the Scriptures. Now, before I get started, here's a list of Christian denominations in the South that supported or defended slavery in the 18th and 19th century United States. The Southern Baptist Convention formed in 1845 specifically because Southern Baptists insisted that slaveholders should be allowed to serve as missionaries and becoming the largest pro-slavery denomination in the South. The Methodist Episcopal Church South split from the Methodist Episcopal Church in 1844 after defending a bishop who owned enslaved people. The Methodist Episcopal bishop at the center of the 1844 slavery controversy was Bishop James Osgood Andrew of Georgia. His ownership of slaves acquired through marriage and inheritance triggered a major schism in the church that led to the formation of the Methodist Episcopal Church South. Presbyterian Church, Old School and Southern branches. Presbyterians divided along sectional lines in the 1840s, and Southern Presbyterians defended slavery as part of God's ordained social order. Protestant Episcopal Church in the Confederate States. The Episcopal Church did not formally split over slavery until the Civil War, but many Southern Episcopal leaders defended slavery as compatible with Christianity. Southern Lutherans. While Lutherans were less centralized, several Southern synods defended slavery and opposed abolitionist movements. Campbellite Restorationist churches in the South, leaders like Alexander Campbell opposed abolitionists and argued slavery was a civil, not a moral issue. And many Southern congregations defended slavery or remained neutral to protect slaveholding members. Independent Southern churches, countless local Baptist, Methodist, and Presbyterian congregations, even those not formally part of a national split, preached pro-slavery theology from the pulpit. Now, the biblical argument: pro-slavery ministers in the American South leaned heavily upon specific passages of the Bible to argue that slavery was divinely approved. Reverend Thornton Stringfellow, a Baptist minister of Virginia, said in 1841, he said, quote, "The right of holding slaves is clearly established in the Holy Scriptures, both by precept and example." They often began with the Old Testament. Leviticus 25 gave laws revealed for sale and redemption of land, houses, and servants. Leviticus 25:44 through 46 describes buying slaves from surrounding nations and treating them as property. They use this to claim God endorsed permanent hereditary slavery. The Christian ministers from the pulpit also pointed to Exodus 21, which revealed laws pertaining to servants, especially verses 2 through 11 and 20 through 21, which regulate slavery and even discuss punishment of enslaved people. These Old Testament verses are a very interesting read indeed. Instead of seeing these as ancient legal concessions, Southern preachers treated these laws as moral permission. Reverend Richard Furman, a Baptist of South Carolina, said in 1823, "The right of holding slaves is clearly established in the Holy Scripture." Reverend Frederick A. Ross, a Presbyterian out of Tennessee in 1857, said, quote, "Slavery is of God and not to be abolished by man." Now, moving to the New Testament, they quoted Ephesians 6:5, Colossians 3:22, Titus 2:9, and 1 Peter 2:18, all of which instruct slaves to obey their masters. These Southern Christian ministers argued that because Paul didn't call for abolition, slavery must be part of God's social order. They even used the book of Philemon, claiming Paul sending Onesimus back to his master proved that Christianity supported the institution. Now, beyond Scripture, Southern Christians insisted that slavery was essential to the economy. Cotton, tobacco, and rice plantations depended entirely on enslaved labor. Ministers preached that ending slavery would destroy the South, create chaos, and lead to violence. Bishop Stephen Elliott, an Episcopal bishop of Georgia in 1862, in a sermon said, "Slavery as it exists at the South is the best relation that can exist between the laboring and the capital classes." They also framed slavery as a civilizing and Christianizing institution. This paternalistic argument claimed enslaved Africans were better off under white Christian masters, a belief that conveniently ignored the brutality and evil of the system. Religion shaped nearly every part of Southern life. Churches were powerful cultural institutions, and when ministers preached pro-slavery theology, it carried enormous authority. By the mid-1800s, major denominations, like I mentioned before, like the Baptists, the Methodists, and Presbyterians, had split from their northern branches specifically over slavery. Southern leaders insisted their interpretation was the true biblical one, even after the Civil War. This shows how deeply slavery had become intertwined with Southern Christian identity. So, how did Southern Christians justify slavery? By selectively quoting Scripture and combining these verses with economic fear and cultural tradition. Now, as a Southern Latter-day Saint who lives in the South, the words of the Lord to the prophet Joseph Smith concerning the creeds and doctrines of churches in his first vision ring true to me. The Lord said, "All their creeds were an abomination in his sight, that those professors were all corrupt, that they draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They teach for doctrines the commandments of men, having a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof." What the Lord told Joseph Smith makes sense to me. And if you like this content, subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more.